welcome to the next episode of the Chris Rod Night Show. Today we have Rod with us, where this week every week we talk about AI news. And this week is a very special week because America has their 47th president, Donald Trump, and returning president, Donald Trump. And we will talk about 5 different things today. First one, we'll talk a little bit about what does Trump's victory means for AI and regulation. Number 2, we'll talk a little bit about, who are other unexpected winner other than, all Trump's allies and Trump. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, what can we do to tackle some of the disinformation that we see online. And we're going to spend some time, then talk a little bit about financing, all the different financing capabilities people are coming up for to finance AI, and probably the build of all the infrastructure required for AI. And lastly, we're going to look into, a little bit of quantum machines on how it's impacting AI. Are you ready, Rod?
I'm totally ready, Max.
So welcome back, Rod. So the first one, when we talk about, which is Trump's victory, I'm gonna say, congratulations to whomever fought for it and won the election. I guess one thing that people are probably very curious about is what Trump's view on AI. I don't know. I haven't read much about it, and I'm certainly not close to that man. But I mean, from an outside-in approach, there is an article from TechCrunch that talks a little bit about Trump's AI approach, right? So the first one will be how it's going to be different from Biden's AI executive order, and also how I would say tariffs conversation with Trump administration might impact other countries. So, I mean, love to get your thoughts, Rod. So, how do you think about, what are the potential impact on AI regulation because of Trump's presidency?
Wow, I would say so much is going on right now and so many things can happen, of course. But let us frame it. So where we stand right now is that in the current administration, they're having an effort on one side to do repatriation of production. So we might know that all these chip production, chip manufacturing has historically happened in Asia and not in the Americas as a continent. And the current administration is still in place, has always tried to do some reshoring and then say, okay, this should be produced here, which in a sense was already, let's say, driven. It was already a result of the previous Trump administration, right? So he was like one of the first to say America first, and we need to do this, we need to manufacture again, and so on and so forth. So it's likely that these trends will continue, especially as things get much more confrontational with China. So I can see how we will get into a situation where more and more, especially this high-end, high added value manufacturing will have to happen in the Americas or in a friendly country. And this is on that side. But I would say that the other thing that will see a lot of changes is on the topic of regulation software. There has been all discussion in recent weeks and so on. So should something like Google should be split into multiple companies? Should be some antitrust procedure against Google? And here, likely what we'll see is that, so for some companies, this might be the case. So Donald Trump might hold some opinions of certain companies that might not have been very friendly towards him. But also, we must remember this idea of you are so with whom you're surrounded. So to say, so where in recent months, Elon Musk has become so almost a friend of the Donald Trump family. So recently I was looking at a picture of, here the election night, and then it's like the whole Trump family. And I think like the only person who is not affiliated to this family is Elon Musk. Yeah? So he's really front and center there. And he, as we know, has Grok AI. He also was one of the original founding members of OpenAI. And then he got disillusioned. There are multiple explanations. Some people say because the share that he expected, he felt that he deserved more because he was one of the original supporters. Whereas his version is he felt that OpenAI was no longer open, and then he needed to have like a counterbalance to that. But nevertheless, he has this alternative, Grok AI. And Grok has been going, let's say, like so in terms of it's integrated into X. It works somehow in that it has less balances and controls than so here other AIs like GPT and so on. And you can, for example, with it generate images that and text that elsewhere will be completely disallowed, it will be unallowed and so on. Because, for example, I saw this one where, and I need to find to share it so here with the audience, so where it's basically you can generate images of Mickey Mouse holding an assault rifle in a school shooting. Yeah. So obviously, like you see, and yeah, this is not real, right? But still, so you can generate gore with cartoons that are on top of like a trademark, right? I guess like Mickey Mouse is protected, and everywhere else it will be a complete, it will be impossible. Often I want to create images and I say things such as, say, I want to create an image in the style of Donald Duck or something. Yeah. So, and then immediately will tell me it cannot do that. So for example, like Mario, I would say, I would like to create an image of a character that looks in the style of the Super Nintendo games of the 90s, like Mario Bros. And immediately something like OpenAI's DALI will say, I can't do that because of like trademarks and so on. But only you can do it with Grok. So this can be because Elon Musk tends to be this so ultra libertarian, free speech is that, can be that. But also it can be that just on one side he doesn't have enough people. So this type of systems require thousands of people. And then as you know, he has kept ex Twitter very, very lean. So it can be that maybe he doesn't have the people to really put all the guardrails and controls for this type of systems. And this all means that he might be one of the main benefactors, he might be one of the main persons benefiting from this transition in his administration. I can totally see how whatever he has to say about AI regulation and so on will be heard. I can see how whatever views he holds will become, maybe if they will not become the administration's views, at least they will have the influence. And this means definitely that for companies like Google, things might get harder, potentially also for OpenAI, but for others, such as, so here you're saying Perplexity, and we can discuss this now, but let's say, of course, also Grok, things will get significantly better. There will be, I can see how either support, so some sort of like discounts, benefits, tax relief, whatever it is. So it will be like economic support, but also that legislation will reflect whatever profiles such as Elon Musk. But there are others that are in this group, right? Like also David Sachs, very famous podcaster, pundit, many, many things that he's these days, BC. He also has his own views about artificial intelligence. So I can see how all this will reflect what this administration wants to do with AI.
Yeah, I think so. So just to summarize a little bit, so there are four things that I heard. Number one is around the potential contentious relationship with China or Asia will probably get more contentious down the line, simply because of trade tariffs, blocking folks from using the right AI infrastructure, which only put America ahead. When it comes to AI, they're already ahead, right? But other countries may also want to, but because of the tariffs, you're going to make things a little bit harder for other countries. So technically make America great again. Number two, I guess it's around the potential antitrust conversation or deregulation conversation. For me, it's a little bit of the same. What I meant by that is number one, if you do AI EO by Biden, it's a preemptive over-regulation attempt, entrenched tech incumbent that we already have. And the change of those regulation will help to spawn more technology companies and make it more competitive. I think that's well, hopefully we'll see more of that. I mean, over time, we know that, regulation tend to entrench incumbents. Like, I mean, just look at banking. So if you're able to change that, that will provide a little bit more of a creative destruction in the market. And then the third thing is around, I guess, in my head, you mentioned a little bit about like benefactors of it, right? Which is like Musk and his play. The question that I have in my head is, has Grok been used for the election? Number one. Number two, if Grok is also a competitor to OpenAI, for whatever reason Elon Musk decided to pursue this route, how would that change? How would that change the landscape, right? How would that change folks who are building on top of AI? So you're building on like almost shaky grounds in a way. And I wonder if regulation will come in and make it, I guess, either easier or harder for other big tech or tech models to compete. I don't know what the play would that be, but I feel like, what Meta did, which is open source it and let others to play around it, but still provide, might actually come out on top, right? Because it allows people to to build and create instead of restrict, if you will.
No, I want to say, so Max, so you were mentioning that so the US is ahead and so on with AI. And here's not that clear, I would say. So, and our show constantly, every time that we mention what's going on in China, there are always so many developments there. We always have this problem of difficult access the sources that report what is really going on on this side of the world. And if we look also like at rankings of like the top AIs, some of them were actually produced by companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, and so on. So it's hard really to tell. Also, if you look at Nature and other type of citation rankings, Chinese universities keep climbing in the ranking and then now are among like the top. So therefore, I don't know really. So if we can say with confidence that the US is really that ahead in anything AI related. Yeah, likely it has some advantage, maybe like a slightly, but it's not, let's say, 10 to 1 advantage. Like it's likely significantly so narrower, are somehow aware of this, of what's going on. And this might also influence any type of legislation.
It's interesting. I think the perception is almost the reality, right? So the perception at the moment is, they are really ahead when it comes to AI, and the reason for that is because I feel like a lot of larger AI companies eventually will just move into the US because of the capital, because of the talent, and hopefully because of the deregulation. We'll see. But I do agree with you. I think America's still ahead, but perhaps not that ahead, right? I think I remember seeing an article they cited China is about 2-3 years behind America. Maybe that gap has closed, and I actually wonder how would that play out if Trump started pushing more tariffs on China. Well, with that, I think there's also one last thing, which you mentioned about all the different winners with Trump, or with Elon Musk being the only non-Trump family to be there. Or should I say, Musk definitely is the new advisor to Trump, and not to mention all the, I guess, his peers around him, which I suspect will have a play in Trump's administration. One thing I guess good about Trump, he's crazy. He talk about a lot of, well, I think sometimes he talks a little bit about stuff that are a little bit crazy, but sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. And like you said, right, he will be the aggregate of people around him. So I felt that this administration is actually going to be better because he surrounded himself with a few more competent folks that may be able to help. At least that's the view.
Yes, and I've been thinking about all this idea of American greatness and so on. One company that for sure something will have to happen so soon is Intel, right? So we spoke here on the show how they have had to have mass layoffs. They seem to have really lost the vision and the ground, although this is historically one of the great iconic so Silicon Valley companies. This is like really, so anyone who grew up in the 90s, the early 2000s and so on remembers each computer used to have an Intel Inside sticker
Yeah.
box. It was always there, right? And now really Intel has lost their way, and this can have consequences long term for the company. And I imagine that just like in the previous administration back in 2016, it was all about manufacturing vehicles, cars, and so on, rescuing these iconic American brands in the automotive world. Then, in this case, one thing where people might start to pay attention will be what's going on with those previous champions who have lost their way, such as Intel.
I think that's the beauty of capitalism, right? You're supposed to have creative destruction. Something great comes, something great goes. Perhaps we'll see, Intel shrinking onto, and Nvidia already is the most valuable company in the world at the moment. So I guess that's the beauty of capitalism in a way. Great. Speaking of winner and loser, there is an article from TechCrunch that talks a little bit about another election night winner, Perplexity. And basically, the whole idea is that, a lot of the larger platforms decided not to go down the route of talking about the election, but Perplexity decided to take an alternative route. So, love to hear your thoughts, Rod, how they have done this and why have they come out as a winner at the election night.
Likely this because in the end, Perplexity is still a startup, right? And then as a startup, you're always thinking, what can I do to set myself apart from others? How can I differentiate myself? And also a little bit of like growth hacking, growth marketing, meaning how can I reach new segments of users? And Perplexity is like, we use it, we know about it and so on, but definitely something that unless you are in tech world, if you are just normal person browsing the internet, I'm sure that you have never seen Perplexity, hear about it. And they launched this election, so to say, election information hub, where it's pretty much like with newspapers and so on, right? We can see how different races, electoral races are performing, and you can ask questions of, so in this specific, so like precinct or this specific county, how things are going on, etc. Others tried also it was possible. So with for example here like Grok, etc. Now we're talking about others tried to enable these, although they were not that precise. Whereas others, such as for example here Google Gemini, etc., they're completely disabled the possibility of asking questions related to the election. And here also I have an anecdote about our own show about it. But in any case, with Perplexity, so they have this dedicated like microsite, micro application where you could go there and then ask questions and have a user interface that is tailored for the election. And I just think it's just this way many people who are not in AI, just regular citizens, voters, they were exposed to Perplexity. So this is one great like growth hacking, guerrilla marketing tactic.
In general, I feel like that's pretty smart, right? Like that is what you're supposed to do as a startup. Almost take that punt, take that bet. And I wonder if this is, the initial bet that they will make against, I guess, Google, for example. Perplexity is trying to compete, with Google as the new search engine. I guess in general, as a tech provider, my general sense is like you are supposed to provide the most accurate information as much as possible, almost removing your own view on what the world is, right? That's why technology is not good or bad. It's just a tool. As you mentioned previously, like Intel, like Nvidia superseding Intel. I wonder one day will we see, Perplexity exceeding Google per se. Obviously, at the moment, it's hard to imagine, but yeah.
And another thing came to mind, Max, to your point of so saying itself apart from Google, it is if you follow Elon Musk or David Sachs on Twitter/X, there was also this controversy because everything's a culture war, everything's like some sort of controversy, and so people were reporting that on Google, if you're searching for where to vote Harris or where to vote for Harris, will display in a map. It will trigger a new user interface on Google that will show you where are locations where you can go and cast your vote. Whereas if you will say the same but for Trump, it will not show anything. It will just show regular results. And they were saying, yeah, this is a bias. This is so definitely they are in favor of one candidate and not the other. Of the official explanation, what Google provided was, no, this is just because there's a county called Harris somewhere. So then this triggers the location. If it is, you'll say, so where to vote in Miami or something, I will trigger this. Whereas there is no county, there is no geographical location. It's called Trump. Others were saying that this is not necessarily precise. Certain queries will give this result, others not, and so on. But nevertheless, this is becoming something where also throughout the election cycle, if you were Googling for example, news related to Trump on Google, there were these reports that they were showing how you will see also news about Harris. There will be like both of them together. Whereas if you just search about, so latest news about Harris, you only see things about her. Nothing will be mentioned about Trump. So it's becoming also something like this now that we're discussing the topic of regulation, which companies might get maybe like some headwind, which companies will be favored in some way or the other. I can see how Perplexity might become the tool of choice for a certain niche that feels that Google's result might be either biased or might have some political angle.
Yeah, it reminds me of the social media. There was a pro-right social media where because everything is so censored on your traditional social media and people just started moving away from those main platform, you kind of just get deplatformed, and then they will just start something on this side. it's almost like a new niche, as you mentioned. But if there are enough people for that new niche, you kind of create a lot more movement from that perspective. But the problem is, if you do that, you deplatform them from the existing platform, like the general public, including myself, won't get to see all this. And then we won't be able to debate for ourselves or critically think about it. What is it that we believe? But I guess I also see the other argument for it, which is the more I'm exposed to it, the more likely, my brain is, entirely following what the rest of the people are thinking. But I also felt that if you don't get the right information, you won't be able to make the right decision.
Max, you were saying about here, so social media that is maybe focused on certain electoral preferences, some worldviews, and Donald Trump has its own social network called Truth Social. Is
Exactly.
pretty much like a yes, and then there are others like Gab. There is this Parler and so on. So indeed, a certain sector of the population feels that their views are not represented or are being suppressed or whatever it is, and they have started to create their own corners on the internet.
Yeah. Which I think the world was big enough to have everybody. So, yeah. I think talking about this, just shift gear a little bit. There's also an article that talk a little bit about how we could deal with the spread of disinformation or AI generated disinformation. I think disinformation is going to exist one way or the other. A lot of it comes down to individual being able to process them. But here they talk a little bit about how and what can we do to stop the spread of AI generated disinformation. A little bit like what you were talking about, Rod, which is you can ask Donald Duck and hold a rifle, and just say like Donald Duck would like you to go to war, and I feel like things like this will happen over time, over years. I think a lot of it comes down to individual being able to process and separate what is right, what is wrong at that moment in time, given the context, for example. And the reason why I said this is if you look at what's going on in America, especially with the election results, like I think it was Nevada, right? Nevada obviously voted to protect abortion, as in keep abortion, so it allows women to have the rights to do abortion. But at the same time, they also voted for Trump. And I realized that humans can have two things in their head, right? You can support something and still support some of the counter of that. I guess the way that in my head being able to stop disinformation, a lot of it comes down to individual, right? Giving them the right information, asking them to make the right decision. I understand that people are sometimes can be lazy, including myself, take mental shortcuts to make decision, but not giving them the tools to do it is probably the wrong way to do it. But I don't know, Rod, what are your thoughts?
I feel that our episode will be cancelled by different AIs. So because coming back to the situation of, so AIs do not allow you to do certain things if you say certain things. And this anecdote, just our last episode, right? So we, at the end of the episode, for anyone who were listening, and I hope everyone is listening every of our episodes, we were saying, so we're just discussing briefly, right? So about elections, what's going on and so on. I think we say 2-3 comments, maybe not even 2 minutes talking about it. It was super brief. Might know, but others might not, that we use extensively AI in order to create all the editorial work of our show, the transcripts, the summaries, etc. We use different AIs. And I was in a situation where I say, hey, I want to use Gemini. Gemini is this version of ChatGPT from Google. And I was curious because now they're offering 1 month subsidized, so they'll give you 1 month free, such that you can try it. And they tout as one of their main features the 1 million context length, so for tokens. And for anyone who doesn't know what this means, it basically means pretty much that you can pass full books, super long text in your prompt, and then it will be able to process it. Something like ChatGPT is quite limited. If you put a long text, it will not let you work with it. It will say you have reached the limit. So it was fantastic. Let's try it. Let's see how it works. And I didn't share like my screen so here our audience can see what I mean. In that, so we're a little bit like censored. So I just pasted basically our transcript and then asked, hey, please provide this transcript. So process it, and then I will need it in some format, I need in some way. And what was the output? So Gemini told me, I can help with responses on elections and political figures right now. While I will never deliberately share something that's inaccurate, I can make mistakes. So while I work on improving, you can try Google search. And Max, really, like we had these comments, right? So did we spoke? So it was just comments, right? So it was really nothing that we said about elections.
Yeah. And we can't even predict election. I doubt that we actually talk about anything to do with election outcomes. We didn't even talk about what what both candidates were talking about. Damn, this is another level. I think this is probably why people decided to go down a certain route. And basically coming back to the deregulation point, right? And are we, because of being woke, and the larger corporates are trying to stay on the right side of the, I would say, political defense, so that doesn't want to take anything, man. But man, this is another thing.
This gives me a lot to think is even if one person is not, let's say, immersed into all these culture wars and say, yeah, like this is a political bias or this doesn't reflect my worldviews and so on. I would say most people are not into this universe. Most people are just like regular internet is so surfers, where they, for example, if they're using Google results, they will say, they will try to do something like this. They will not be able to do it and will say, okay, I can't. But then what happens is that we have a situation where we live in a restricted internet, right? So it's like certain things we cannot do it anymore. And so we see the results some companies want and so, and then, yeah, so we're discussing now with regulation, Max. I can see how now with the new administration that potentially feels some grievances regarding how it was being portrayed or how let's also remember also like he got banned, right? Like so Meta
Yeah.
X before Elon Musk and so on, they banned, they blocked everything related to Donald Trump. And I can see how now in the new administration, some of these culture war issues or internet access restrictions, they might change in some way or the other for good or for
Yeah.
better or for bad.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I cannot tell if it's right or wrong for large platform to decide what information to serve. I just felt that, based on my previous comment, I feel like, people need to be given the right information to make decisions themselves. But at the same time, we need to help them to make the right, I guess, decision to get there. So I guess it's probably very hard to run a platform like this. And I think it's the same thing, right? Let's say in China, even in, I guess, in Malaysia, for example, there are going to be problems like this. I think this is just something that we have to deal with, as you go. I think no matter where we go, there's always going to be some censorship going on.
Yes.
So it's just how are we going to deal with it, and whether or not we are, I guess, truthful enough to go search for what is actually true.
And this connects nicely with so the topic that I want to discuss
Mhm.
around disinformation and everything connected to AI, where I've been having this thought on we were, let's not say promised, but we were warned that this election cycle and in general, so these new elections that are happening all around the world, they will be heavily affected, they will be mired by all type of AI-related deep fakes, AI-related disinformation, misinformation, whatnot. And so, sure, it happens. So you see people create either images, memes, posts, whatever it is, that they are not grounded on reality.
Mhm.
But I didn't have the impression, Max, or maybe you see differently, so maybe you have seen something different. But I didn't get the impression that this is something that was somehow like pervasive or somehow might have affected. I'm not sure that anyone who saw, let's say, like a Mickey Mouse holding an assault weapon, they said, "Oh, I will cast my vote in this way or the other," or "This has changed my opinion about this topic," and so on. So always here with everything related to misinformation, sometimes I feel is exaggerated because I can notice that we're still first everything I relate is not that good yet. So you can still
Mhm.
notice images, they look generated, they look fake, right? So people
Yeah.
can still discern. And second, I would say that most people they don't spend their days on the internet. So as a result, they don't get to see this, whatever is going on floating around generated. And I don't believe that this is impacting anyone's decision. Or have you seen something different, Max?
Interesting. So on deepfake, so I'm trying to think actually, has it moved into the mainstream world by, changing what people believe? Oh, there is one. I think I remember one. I think there was a catfish problem, I think somewhere in Asia. can't remember. So basically, there was a guy that conned another young guy, and basically, and that young guy fell in love with this deep fake generated. Oh, I think it was an AI. It wasn't deep fake. It was just more of an AI. So he would fell in love with an AI, which technically is not a human. And then I think that kid killed himself as a result of that. And I suspect with AI moving, more and more quicker down the line, um, maybe incidents like this will take place more. Maybe not to the extent of lives being taken, but I also felt that because of that, we then as human being or as society, we will be a lot more cautious. It's a little bit like how, because of the pervasiveness of Nigerian prints, now we will never reply any email to do with Nigerian prints, right? The scam, right? I think at the moment, that was like the most severe case that I've heard of because of AI. But, I suspect there are more cases that I've never heard of.
Going to our topic of access to information, worldviews, and restriction and so on, one thing that comes to mind on, so like a recent case of fake news that had negative consequences was, maybe you remember, like early this summer in the UK, there was all these riots and protests almost all across the country. And the source for this was someone posting that there was some violent incident that they associated with asylum seekers. Turned out everything was made up. That was not how it happened and so on. But nevertheless, that really infuriated a segment of the population. They went to the streets. There were clashes with police and so on. But in the end, it was not created by an AI. It was just someone basically
Yeah.
so spreading lies and so on, right? So it's always this thing of maybe like some live in some bubbles and then they believe in this and so on. But nevertheless, it's the question of, is AI or humans working with AI generating fake news, and this is somehow affecting our real life? I'm not sure that we're there yet.
But yeah, I think there will be occasional stuff that happen, right? I'm pretty sure I am subjected to some AI generated information, like it or not. I think for global consciousness wise, I think we will have to do our own research, as the crypto world would like to say, right? Like you have to do your
Yes.
own research for everything, critically think about what you believe, what you don't, and taking the time to able to do that. Great. So, for the last two segments of today's episode, we'll talk a little bit about information. Politics is always a little bit sensitive on that. But now we want to come back to the hard stuff, right? Instead of the soft stuff. So we're seeing, Wall Street, it's trying to create a very different debt market to help people to buy AI chips. I find that super interesting. It's almost like, providing, I guess, loans for any folks who wants to buy NVIDIA's AI chip. This is probably fueling, in my opinion, NVIDIA's revenue and also their current market cap. And I also find it quite interesting. I wonder if schemes like this or loans like this exist previously, and I actually never get a chance to actually look into other sort of like securitization or other sort of like loan solutions. But Rod, happy to hear a little bit of your thoughts. Right, what is going on here?
I would say two trends. The first one is everyone or many companies need GPUs, and if you want a GPU these days, or maybe not one, but you want multiple GPUs, especially these more powerful ones,
Yeah.
you're put on a wait list. It can take up to like 18 months, 2 years for your order to be fulfilled. So high is the demand for NVIDIA GPUs these days. So if you are in a high growth situation and you need to continue buying, then there is definitely a market for someone who has access either to the financial resources or to the GPUs itself. Let's say like you can treat GPUs commodities, so to say, to provide them, to give them in credit. Also, we haven't seen on the startup world how there are VCs or accelerator programs whose main promise is you'll get access to a GPU cluster. You will be able to so run your startup with some, we'll maybe not give you here a cash investment, we'll give you an investment in access to GPU hours and so on. So all of this is just signs of crazy high demand for our resources. And at the same time, supply constraints going back now. So harking back to all the things that we're discussing about reshoring and so on, how the production of all this hardware needs to be increased, needs to be significantly boosted. But in the meantime, you can have this nice situation if you have the resources of saying, hey, I will either lend you or finance for you such that you can have access to this hardware.
Yeah, I think other than the hardware side, I also felt that with the private capital side, especially with the rise of private credit, if anyone follows financial services, it's like there's a huge boom on where you could access capital, especially on the private lender side, because over time, because of regulation, banks have offloaded a lot of all these loans to somewhere else. The risk has transferred from your traditional banking institutions to all those, I would say, larger institutions outside of their banking industry or NBFI, non-banking financial institutions, to take on those risks. And I felt like they have raised a lot of capital, and then now they're going after any sort of opportunity to finance stuff. AI is the story of the moment where people needs a lot of computing capability, as you mentioned, Rod. This kind of creates like a new market for it to I guess provide secure loans against all the NVIDIA chip. One thing that I have in mind is like, is this NVIDIA chip an asset, right? Because technically it doesn't appreciate, it only depreciates because NVIDIA is going to come out with something new. So I wonder how would this play out.
And Max, you are an expert also in the crypto space. And are there parallels from the crypto world in terms of like miners or others who need access also to high intensive computational resources and then getting access to this type of alternative finance? So have you seen things like that?
So in crypto world, it's an interesting one. I have seen people buy all this ASICs chip. So I think I have a friend who actually did like a farm of them, and he doesn't do it himself. Obviously, he went and find investors to be able to finance it, and then he can set up the farms. I've also seen folks that work with like governments to do that. Basically, have government to finance that package, and then basically move the entire thing there and then share some sort of revenue or reduce the amount of electricity that they pay. Have I seen loans that are being made and then protected by the chip itself? No. And the reason for that is, I'm sure you know, within the crypto space, banks generally don't like to finance that. Simply because of high risk, simply because of regulation. So there are just multiple things that we need to take into account. So I must say, within the crypto space, in order to finance a hardware, hasn't happened that much. But if you want to talk about non-bank financing, then there is a lot, I must say. When I say a lot means, it could be a venture capital arm that finance that. It could also be a larger corporate, right? You could think of like, people like MicroStrategy, which is raising bonds to buy even more Bitcoin. There's no reason why they wouldn't raise bonds to run some sort of farm to mine for crypto. I've also seen larger companies, they're big miners, they are raising capital. I think they have been successful, only because they have been successful in doing other stuff as well, right? Almost different type of revenue stream, not just from the proceeds of Bitcoin or the proceeds of confirming transactions. So yeah, not secured against a hardware. And I must say, I am no crypto expert, so things might have changed.
I would say, Max, so compared to the average person, you are like so the mega crypto guru.
Yeah, I mean, the crypto stuff comes back to what we were talking about, right? Like, which is to enable certain activities by human, and then using money as a way, or should I say, monetary value as a way to incentivize movements. And I think this financing that the Wall Street is trying to do, I think will basically unlock even more opportunities for AI, because you make it easier for people to acquire chip. Also, you make it easier for people to build on top, and less likely to be deplatformed. Well, unless we do not know what regulation is going to happen. But I think in general it's a good thing. And I also felt that over time I've trusted boom and bust is a feature, not a bug. We
Yes.
need that boom and we need that bust. Um,
Yes, so absolutely, Max, and also like another thing that with all this, so looking at the article and thinking of this article itself, there is a company called CoreWeave. So it's not only let's say like the perplexities and all these application level companies that need access to GPUs, but they're also just companies that say hey, I'm competing against, or I want to compete against Amazon Web Services, against and then this CoreWeave has raised more than 10 billion in debt just alone in the past 12 months with a purpose of buying GPUs. So here we are really talking about some massive amounts of money that are being poured into in a buying hardware. And of course, if you are one private equity group or any type of like investor, then you see here it is a golden opportunity. I can finance this, I can provide the resources so for others to build these data centers, but also an alternative is I can trade it as a commodity and I can just provide like the GPUs themselves if I have access to them.
I think talking about GPU and computing, I think for the last minute, we're going to touch upon a little bit around, I guess this has been around for some time, which is around quantum machines. So there's an article in TechCrunch that, there's a quantum machine in NVIDIA trying to use machine learning to get closer to, making a quantum computer work. I think to me, it's quite interesting. I recently just started, learning a little bit more about quantum, and I just find that super interesting. Are we, this feels like if it works, it feels like a new paradigm of computing because you just unlock a lot more computing power. But Rod, happy to hear your thoughts a little bit. What is NVIDIA, I guess, trying to do here, and how will that bring us to the next level of computing?
So with the caveat that I'm not a quantum expert, so this is something that also I'm here just curious about it. And for example, when I was doing some of my PhD, I was sitting next to a quantum research group, so I could always hear what they were talking about and then getting an impression of where things stand and so
Oh,
on.
that's cool. That's really cool.
Yes, it is really, as you were saying, a different paradigm of how computing is supposed to take place compared to what we use. But as a result, it's much more challenging to try to have things that go beyond simulation that actually do things. And quantum is always one of these technologies where people say it's just like 10 years away or something. And this has been said for, I don't know, the last 5 decades or something like this. So it has been going on for a while where maybe there is some over optimism, whereas the actual physical challenges are much more harder. And in this specific case, it's pretty much about just so here error calibration of these quantum systems and how NVIDIA hardware can be used in order to correct this calibration. I can see it happening just alone on trying to have algorithms. So given that NVIDIA GPUs in the end, they're really good at working with linear algebra in order to do all type of algebraic computations.
Mm-hmm.
They're very fast, very efficient. So it's very convenient to create high-performing algorithms that, for example, can help correct this type of errors. However, if this will result in some sort of advancements, breakthroughs, and so on, well, this is something where remains to be seen because, so here, quantum is always where, a lot of people, they believe we're very close, but in the end, they're disappointed. And I also know, like, from my personal environment and so on, those who were heavily involved in all the quantum space, but in the end, they end up leaving it because they felt we're still also so far away from actual applications. Everything's still very, very theoretical. We are best case, we're either using some approximation simulations of how this could look in reality. Worst case, we're just discussing hypotheticals in a pure theory that we are here trying to so elucidate, calculate, etc. Here, I would say difficult to see what is here just some sort of PR, what is here some sort of like positive news, because this is being reported by a startup, right? Like, this is a company called Quantum Machines. And is this really something? So it's reported that Quantum Machines and NVIDIA are using machine learning to get closer to an error-corrected quantum computer. Is this really just some sort of like positive PR spin because the company is trying to raise money and so on? So they are trying to find investors who say, whoa, what's that? And then, for example, you see this max and say, hey, this looks exciting. I want to put my money here. Here's my money. Take it. Or is there really something? Yeah, there is a meme, right? There is like, here's my money, just like that meme. Or is there more to that? It's always very, very hard to say in these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to a couple of points that you mentioned. Number one is around, I guess, just on the feasibility of building something like this. It's going to be hard, at least based on my understanding so far. And I also felt that, computers like this, new paradigms like this will take time. And if you look at, just compare it to, like, when was AI first, considered It's like what, 1950s, and then only until like 2016, 2017, 18, 19 that we see something big happen. And lastly, we see quantum computing was first proposed in 1980s, and the first experimental demonstration didn't happen until like 1998. All this is obviously based on Google, and so I assume that it will take us another 50 years to get there. So maybe when we are like 50, 60, we'll get there.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. We cover a lot of ground. So we covered everything from Trump's victory in America, what will happen to AI, and then we talk a little bit about how Perplexity, stands out from the rest of its competitor. We then spend a little bit of time talking about disinformation, and as well as the new financing packages for CoreWeave, which is a AI capacity provider or computing capacity provider. And lastly, we touch a little bit about quantum. It's yet to be seen how that will happen with AI. And with that, as always, thank you so much for listening in. We really enjoy doing this. If you have any comments, thoughts, ideas, please leave it at the comment box below. And lastly, have a good week. Thank you.
And remember to tune in every Monday for a new episode of the CRM show. So it's every Monday we have our releases.
Lovely.